everyone, it's Margaret Manning here with 60andMe. This is the place where women who are aging beautifully come to be inspired. And one of the things on our mind as we're getting a little older is making friends and just building stronger relationships. And especially if you're thinking about retiring overseas, I have two guests with me today that are going to be talking to us about how retiring overseas can actually help making friends and building your relationships stronger. Now, my first guest is Susan Heskins. She is sitting next to her husband, Dan Prescher. And the two of them have both have degrees in journalism and are senior editors for International Living. They have been all over the world. They've lived in Panama, Merida, Yucatan. They've lived in Ecuador and now in Mexico, and have written about destinations all around the world where you might want to retire. Dan is also the lead on International Living events that are held around the world to give you a taster of if you're thinking of retiring abroad. So I'm so happy to have you here, Susan and Dan. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here, Margaret.
You know, we've talked about a few other things related to retiring abroad. And maybe, Dan, you could start just by giving us a little bit of a background on International Living, kind of who you are, who you're working for, and what you offer someone thinking of retiring overseas.
Well, about 40 years ago, a newsletter started that exposed people to the idea of looking beyond their borders, of actually retiring in a place where the weather might be better, the cost of living might be lower. What a concept, right? For 40 years, we've been writing about that. And about 19 years ago, Susan and I said, yeah, we'll volunteer for that. Send us abroad. And
Sign me up.
Yeah, we'll write about it. And for the last 19 years, that's what we've been doing, writing about the places people have been retiring abroad and the ways that they've been accomplishing their goals once they've moved.
Well, I've been really impressed with the resources from International Living in general, and it's nice to meet the people behind the words because I've been reading your articles for years now. But I forgot to mention that you have got a new book. It's called Live Richer, Spend Less, and it's International Living's ultimate guide, it says, to retiring overseas. We've talked in other videos about finances and about the health benefits to moving abroad, but tell us about how it impacts the social relationships. I mean, I can think of a few challenges, but how do you think it strengthens friendships and relationships? Susan?
Well, first of all, when you move overseas, you move into a community typically where there are other expats who've gone ahead of you. You will need some guidance when you get there, so you will be reaching out to those people. You become part of what we call an expat tribe in these places. And you have similar interests just by the fact that you are all there together, that you've come from another place, and that you're in this sort of life together where you're experiencing the new aspects of your new community. So we have found that you have more social engagements than you ever had before you moved overseas. There's always a
potluck,
for dinner,
a musical event, a lot of volunteer organizations or events that go on where you're asked to contribute to some of the local communities. So you form really fast friendships. And sometimes those kind of splinter off. You have the sewing group or the bridge playing group or the people who play pickleball or get together to
something
watch.
For everyone. Yeah.
So you will find that you form really fast friendships, as well as with the locals who see you as somebody who's sort of exotic and comes from a far off place that they maybe haven't visited, maybe want to visit. They want to know about your life. So you'll get lots of invitations to events and parties with local families' homes. And so it's a really fun way to sort of immerse yourself in a new culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also just, like you said, having that common challenge, like you're learning a new language or you want to know where the markets are, you want to get things, and it kind of forces you to go deep almost immediately. Like it's not just an acquaintance and after a few days, you're totally in it together.
Right. Yeah, you rely on one another.
Yeah.
We forget sometimes at our age how networks are formed. And if you think back on it, your your best networks are formed when you're in a new situation and you have to learn quickly from other people. You change schools, you change jobs, you move to another community. That's how people make networks. And an expat community, that just happens instantly, kind of like by osmosis, organically.
Yeah. And you're trying to learn your way around a new place too. And it's like funny when you were talking there about like locals wanting, being curious about you and wanting to get, to become a friend. I've got somebody who's, we went to Portugal actually to look at a piece of land that they're thinking of building a co-living space on, where people can come and stay. And he said that they got there as doing their test and they were having a parsnip or turnip festival or something at the village, and it was like, what was that all about? And everybody was there, and they were all doing recipes with parsnips or turnips. I can't think which one, but it's that kind of just like discovery together, and being in it together.
You really don't need any excuse to have an expat gathering or a community-wide gathering. Most of the places where we've lived, the expats and the locals have come together, and now they're sort of symbiotic, and there are always people from all different cultures at these gatherings. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like you said, that you can sometimes make a stronger relationship when you're all facing a common, challenge. But I do have one important question to ask you. And this has been in the back of my head for the whole conversation. And that is, what if you move to a place like this, a beautiful place where it ticks all the boxes, but you get there and you really miss your family? Or if you're a grandparent, you just are so torn because you want to be part of the life of your grandchild. How do you deal with that?
It's funny you should mention that. We have just gone through that. Let me preface this by saying the internet has changed everything.
Right.
Yes.
When we first moved abroad almost 20 years ago, instant messaging had just started. It was like magic. You could write somebody a message and 5 minutes later, an answer would come back.
A text, yeah.
Now you can have
FaceTime.
Skype, FaceTime calls, chat like we're chatting now. It really helps stay in touch with family.
Yeah.
That being said, if you suddenly have a beautiful, engaging, intelligent, endlessly entertaining 5-year-old granddaughter that you want to be around more,
you might want to move closer.
You might want to move closer. We kind of relocated to Mexico because logistically it's easier to get back and forth to our granddaughter than it was from Ecuador. You move for logistics. You adapt your life to fit the changes that happen, and that doesn't stop when you move abroad. Things keep changing for you.
And I'll just add one thing. One trend, a growing trend that we're seeing is people who are just living overseas part-time.
Yes.
So even living overseas part-time can save you a bundle of money, especially if you're going, say, during the winter months when you want to go somewhere nice and warm. You're not paying all of those costly heating bills for your house back home, and maybe you can rent it on Airbnb to bring in some extra income while you're away. Whatever. There are lots of opportunities to explore this world, and that's one of the things that we're seeing is people who are keeping one foot at home with the grandkids and one foot overseas with the adventure.
Yeah. No, I have a friend in Bali who is from Minnesota or somewhere, and she just goes 3 times a year. And one of her daughters just had twins. I mean, she's got like a lot of grandchildren, but she just hops from place to place, sees everybody, and then goes back to her world. And I think that's very powerful. The comment I would make too, and maybe you can just tell me whether you agree, is that kids want you to be happy. Your grandchildren want you to be happy. And, I just went away for a week, and my grandson is only 2, but he said, Baba, go on the plane. He says, is Baba going to India? Because he's got this thing about India. I don't know where he got that from me. But it wasn't India, but they want you to have fun, don't you think?
They're fascinated by it.
Who doesn't want to have a grandparent that they can go visit in France or Panama or somewhere like that? So it's I think it's a really cool thing that we show our family and our grandkids that we are living our lives, and that they'll hopefully follow in our footsteps and be happy too.
And it works both ways. We spent a week on the beach with our granddaughter last year in Panama, and she was like a fish in water. She loved it. She was having a great time. That's something she'll never forget. Never forget that.
Well, travel is a great gift to give your grandchildren anyway. And if you're being an example, I mean, they've got their life at home. They've got their little, you think you're such a big part of their life, but they've got school and their own little friends, and, they've got to live their life too.
Yeah.
Right. And we figure by the time she's a teenager, she probably won't want to spend as much time with us. So, we're happy to be able to go back and forth really often right now and spend time with her. But, like you said, that is one of the challenges. And it's one of the things that we tell people, you really have to know yourself really well. And if this is going to be something that you can get beyond or not.
Yeah. And we also have a presenter at many of our conferences who says, if you're building or buying a house abroad and you want to make sure that there's a place for your relatives to stay when they come and visit, be careful because they might.
No, I was actually reading your book on this particular subject because I was skimming through this. You're great. It's really a great book, actually. It's like lots of information. But it was like, be sure you go, and you mentioned this before, Dan. Be sure you go for a few months without making like deep roots, because it may just be too painful. You may just have to be with those grandkids for at least until they're teenagers or whatever you've got in your mind. Would you say that is even more true if you have doubts?
Absolutely. And that's fine. I mean, no matter what your deal breaker is, if it's being away from your family or if it's not getting exactly the kind of food or experience that you want, knowing that is better than not knowing that. And if you try a place out, no matter how much research you do, you'll get a gut feeling about it after you've been there for a while. And trust that gut feeling. It's not jumping off a cliff. It's not a one-way deal. You can change your mind. You can
go back home.
You can go back home. You act on the information that you get and make it part of your life.
That's the thing when you're 60 plus, no one's judging. I mean, really, they do just want you to be happy, your children and your grandchildren, and you've got to just go for things and, be prepared to fail sometime, or fail, but just shift gears or pivot, whatever the expression is. And, but I think what I really wanted to get your opinion on was this idea of friendship, though. Social isolation is like a huge problem as you get older, and our community is older women. So I loved that you helped us to understand how intimate it can be very quickly.
You have to really try not to have a social life if you move. I mean, you may have to make a conscious decision not to have friends and a network and a circle.
Or not to go out every night because you could.
Yeah, that's just what happens. It's an organic part of being an expert.
Well, I'm actually very, very excited to hear you talking about this, and I hope that people who are watching this are getting inspired too, because International Living has been around for 40 years, and they've got really a lot of information on just about every country that you could imagine. What's your favorite country, by the way, Susan and Danny?
People ask me that all the time, and I say it's like trying to choose your
favorite child.
Really, but they're all so different.
Yeah.
I love Europe for the history and the old world charm and the culture. But there's something I love about the indigenous parts of Latin America. I love the artisan crafts that you find in Mexico and Ecuador, where we've lived. I mean, I could spend a lot of time, and Dan will attest that I have done this, shopping those indigenous handicraft markets. It's just, so colorful, and their culture is so colorful. Many of them wear the indigenous costumes that their ancestors have worn for generations. Yeah. And I just find that really charming. Going to a shaman, I mean, we don't have this kind of stuff in the United States. And so it's really hard to choose, Margaret, I guess.
Dan, how about you, Dan? Do you have a favorite?
The result has kind of been that we become serial relocators.
Yeah.
We were posted to several different places early in our career with International Living. And as soon as we realized that it wasn't that hard to move, we just kind of started doing it every couple of years.
It's a perfect downsizing exercise, isn't it?
Exactly.
It is. It's absolutely perfect, right?
You shed stuff. And there's something about every place that we've lived that we've absolutely loved.
Yeah.
If everything was perfect, it would be heaven and we'd be dead. So hopefully that won't happen soon.
Not soon. Well, look, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us, and reassuring us about the real world of moving abroad. You know what really happens, and it has sparked an interest in you. And if you have, check out their book. It's actually a really good one. It's Live Richer, Spend Less: Ultimate Guide to Retiring Overseas. And if you've got questions, please leave them in the section below, and we'll be happy to have a chat with you and answer any questions that you've got. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Our Patreon supporters help us to make a bigger difference in the lives of women over 60 all around the world. They get exclusive videos, live video shows, discounts, and much more. So please look for the link on this page. It is somewhere down here, up there. And join our tribe of women in our 60andMe community who are actually making a big difference in the world, challenging aging stereotypes. So thank you so much for your support.